Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Leila Rao. We talked about finding out what politicians don't talk about, speaking truth to power, and not selling vanilla ice cream. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, hello, everyone, and hello. With me, I have Laila. Is that how I should pronounce your name?
It's fine. Layla is normally the more American way, but
Layla. Leila. Okay, I'm always preferring these days to ask it on camera because we're coming from different kind of cultures. It's nice to I can ask it up front and then try to pretend I knew it right from the start. But I think this is again more obvious. And let me also show you a little bit on where both of us are. So I am in Belgium at this time in Ghent, and you are, and let me ask Google to show where you were going. I think all the way to Atlanta, if I'm correct, and we're going to Decatur. Is that how I should pronounce that one?
yeah, Decatur is just outside Atlanta.
Decatur.
Wow.
That's the nice things about things like Google that we can actually show a little bit. Ah, there, I told you there's some things with my mice. So now at my side, it's 26 minutes after 6 in the evening. What's the time on your side?
It is 26 minutes afternoon for me.
So we see a lot of miles apart and actually a lot of time zones at the same time apart as well. So that's a big difference that we have. And for the few people that don't know, could you introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you and what do you want people to know about you?
Who am I? Good question, right? So my name is Leila Rao, and I'm an organizational change consultant, which basically means that I work in complex organizations to change the culture, which we interpret as how people show up to each other. So it's communication, it's behavior. It's really about having everybody in an organization show up authentically themselves in a way that optimizes their ability to work together. Most of my clients, because I'm American, are federal government agencies. But anytime you have lots of people trying to do good things together, that's an opportunity for us to do what we do.
Wow, that's a nice way to introduce yourself, and it's a nice way of working, of improving the world in a way when you work with a lot of stuff. So that's yeah, I would say a really nice thing to do. So let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
So the fact that I started off as a newspaper reporter, a career like this, you don't plan, at least I did not plan to be in this job 20 years ago when I was studying in college. So I was going to be a newspaper reporter. And it's very long, it's not on my resume anymore, but it fundamentally shaped so much of what I do. Because, working for a small town newspaper in the US, you are immersed into the fabric of the community. You do everything from go to a city council meeting to cover a car accident to cover a new business opening. So I think that experience of really understanding all the different things that go into a community and also being able to talk to anyone about anything comes directly from journalism.
Wow, because so that means that, well, probably at the start of every journalist, there is no particular direction or no particular thing where you were supposed to do. Did you have something in mind where you wanted to go, or was that a broad interest? Or how would that was that for you?
So I think I was just really interested in how the world worked. How do we become who we are? How does this thing work? And I really liked understanding how things are put together, especially government, because my degree is in international studies and political science. So, in college, you study the theory of our institutions, of politics, of democracy. But when you're working as a newspaper reporter, especially back then, you experience government and all these concepts at a very literal level. How does a small town function? What do people do? city council? What did the mayor do? How do we all interact with government? So it was, I don't think I really had I want to be this or that, but I liked understanding and I liked being able to tell people stories. The thing about journalism is you, like I said, you get good at talking to people and you understand what makes somebody them. What is their story? How do they see themselves? Because nobody sees themselves as a villain. Everybody is a hero in their own story. And I really love being able to understand what drove somebody.
That's nice. And when you say, yeah, everybody, I really like how you say that everybody sees them the hero in their own story. Yeah, I think even the villains themselves in the movies, they also I hear sometimes hear that from people who play villains, that they say, okay, I want to understand that person because I want to understand the story behind them and how what's the person behind it. So I recognize that. Um, is that and you talked about what you learned in the theory and then trying to do that in practice. Was there a big difference for you? Did were there things that surprised you completely when you started?
It does, because when you study government, at least in American universities, it's very, you learn the foundations and the intent of the founders, and you learn how things are supposed to be. But the reality is much more nuanced and I think a little bit darker, because so often we interpret what we see through our own lens. And I was a pretty naive student, right? So of course government is good, right? It does good things. So yes. But then seeing how people intersect with government. I mean, these days in the US, DEI, diversity, inclusion, discrimination, those are big things. But I also thought that in a very, very small town, what does government presence look like on one side of town versus a different side of town? Why are some people hostile to government? What are the things that led people to this? So it's very much the understanding why. And it doesn't mean that I agree or we should agree. It just means that being able to understand how somebody else sees the world and their place in the world so that we can all come to a better mutual understanding.
Wow, that's a big challenge, I would say, because especially in a small. Well, I'm not sure if it's harder or easier. Actually, it's a good question. Is that harder or easier in a small town than in a big town?
I think it's easier in a small town to see the gaps because in a big town, I think, most of our lives are very in little bubbles. We talk to people who think like us, who sound like us, who are in our neighborhood. In a small town, you really do get exposed to everybody because geographically it's 10 miles, which is a couple of kilometers, but you're walking in other people's shoes. Literally, you see the degree of infrastructure in one part that's not there in another part. It's really hard to miss in a small town.
Mhm. That's yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And was it a conscious choice for you to do that work in a small town, or just no?
No, journalism is a very tough industry to break into, so you take whatever jobs you can get. So for me, it happened to be a small town in Georgia.
Okay, so that wasn't just yeah your choice. You just applied, and then okay, you were happy when you had that.
Yeah.
And so the second part of this question is how influenced you that? Could you have some examples on that influence?
Sure. So when I started covering local government, we had editors who would tell you how to prepare your job, how to interview, who to interview. And one of the editors I worked with was very, very skeptical. And he actually had the saying that I still remember 20 years later: politicians are lying liars who lie for a living. I'm telling you to go find out what they're not talking about. So it's very cynical, but I think what it taught me is how to hear what's not being said. So when I'm in a conversation or I'm facilitating a discussion these days, I think I'm attuned to hearing the nonverbal language as well as those who are not actively participating. Because sometimes it's really easy to default to who's most verbal, who's most vocal. So I think what I took away from journalism is to understand that what's not being said, whose voices are not being heard, and how to amplify the whole story.
Yeah, which is probably a big important part of journalism because yeah, the people with the loud voices, everybody hears them, and I think these days with the social media, that's even easier to get their messages. And then the people who, yeah, who don't have a large voice, but it doesn't mean that their opinion shouldn't be heard and is not important. It's just
Absolutely.
people that.
And I think it's really important.
Okay, let's bring both of us on screen back
About
again.
culture tend to be in boardrooms where executives and consultants talking about culture and vision and mission statements. And the way we do organizational culture is we involve everybody in that process because our culture is our collective experience. So I think the takeaway for me from journalism that's even more important in business is how do we hear everybody's perspective so that we understand the intent and the impact.
And has that changed a lot? I mean, with social media and everything?
So I think social media certainly has expanded whose voice is heard, but I think it also has done the opposite. It's magnified a few voices and it's flattened others. It's so much of the nuance of conversation and experience, I think, is lost in social media. I think if you're somebody who's very thoughtful, intentional, you can probably hear a wider range of voices on social media. But for most people, the experience tends to be the loudest wins again.
Yeah, that's the feeling I have. And indeed, like you say, I still remember the the old days of Twitter, that in the very beginning you could have really hard and good discussions with people because we could take the time. But then now there's so many other eyeballs on top of that that join in and then miss part of the conversation, or you have to start again. And it's like, yeah, that nuances is very, very hard in that kind of way, I would say.
And I think also it's the algorithms, right? I mean, the tech industry, they run our lives on algorithms. Those algorithms reinforce the division as opposed to the nuance. It's hard to empathize and find common ground if you lose the nuances. And the algorithms are geared towards showing us more of what we react to most viscerally, which unfortunately too often is very divisive.
Ah, yeah, of course. The more divisive it is, the more, yeah, it gets attention, and the more, yeah, and then and the things that even though the nuances might be there in extra answers or whatever, they are not boosted as much as the ones that are more, yeah, one way, I would say, or divisive. So that's a good thing. So thanks for sharing that, because that's yeah, that is a very interesting way of coming into an industry, and a way of working, and like you say, listening to the people that are not voicing. As a journalist, that's your job in a way. And so for me as a facilitator as well, but we don't always learn or think about it. And yeah, it's
I
good.
think the journalism quote that stays with me is to speak truth to power. And that is exactly what we should be doing as facilitators and change agents too. So it all comes together.
Yeah, I really like that. Speak truth to power. Okay, let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you do now, what would it become to you, Avi?
Obviously journalism, right? That was my first love. It was the dream that I had for a long time. The industry changed, so I changed with it. I think in another lifetime, I would have loved to be a librarian. Books and writing are longtime passion. Uh, Maybe a writer or maybe a professor. But this particular career, it's something that I stumbled into. It wasn't planned, and I love it because all the different careers I've had converge, and I can use it all here. But I would say some type of a librarian, reporter, professor are probably the path not taken.
And when you say librarian, because I yeah, there's lots of books behind me. I'm a vivid reader myself as well. But what interests you then in the job of librarian? What is for you so interesting? Because librarians, it's not so much about reading; it's more like helping others about other books. So, what is interesting for you about that job?
I think two things. One is a childhood memory. When we first moved to the US, I was about 10 years old. And I don't think I particularly wanted to be here, wasn't too excited until my parents took me to the New York Public Library in New York City. And I was like, oh, wow, all these books for free? Like, you can read all these books? I think that early love, just like libraries are magical places. And I think to me, a librarian is keeping that magic open for other people, for helping people discover what they don't know.
Hmm.
I know the reality is more administrative, all of those things, but the mental idea of a librarian as being trusted caretakers of sacred spaces and knowledge and learning, that stayed with me for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If librarians bring you new yeah, new worlds in a way when they advise you book. Oh, you read this book, you liked it. Well, maybe that's another book you might also like, and things in that kind of direction. So I can definitely see that, and definitely also see the other part where a lot of jobs these days are much more bureaucratic and lots of other stuff that happened. But telling people about books and reaching, and it's yeah, it's something that I think is so important having books available because especially well depending on type of books, the books behind me are much more business books, so that's books that I might read multiple times or at least reference multiple times. But reading books, fiction, that's typically a book that you read well, maybe a couple of times, but probably not 10 times. There might be a few exceptions. um, but then what you do with it and with the library, that's so much nicer that a lot more people can read these, and the few ones that you really like you can still buy, of course, if you want to have it in person.
I
So
think that also there's a communal experience of learning. You know, libraries and bookstores, you stumble into other people who love the book that you loved, and conversations spark. It, it's again one of those places the magic happens. So I still love libraries and bookstores because you learn something new every single time. And usually, you know, librarians especially, they're amazing people, and they always point out something new that I didn't know before, some unexpected connection that they can see because they do have access to so many books. You know, the human touch, I think.
yeah, that's definitely something I recognize as a reader and walking into libraries and everything there. And indeed, these days I see the libraries in Belgium being much more places to meet other people and community, and libraries doing a lot of stuff to not just offer books, but also either if it's an author that comes to speak or there's something else that's happening. It's bringing children there to do something else, discover something else. It might not even be book related, but yeah, related to computers or whatever. And it's learning, opening new worlds. Definitely something
Learning and
I recognize.
community, right? I mean, libraries have become our community centers in a way that we, at least in the United States, we don't have a lot of shared community spaces. And libraries, to me, are the last thing that we really have that everybody can access freely.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I've never seen it. Well, it's only the last couple of years that I've seen it, that it's actually much more organized in a way to create these kind of communities. I didn't really value that before or as a child, I would say. But, thanks for sharing that. That's
Thank
an
you.
important part. Let's move to that third question. What is for you your biggest challenge right now, at least the one that you want to put out on the internet? And why is that a good thing for you?
Good question. So I think the biggest challenge is how to be true to yourself. So as I said, you know, I'm very idealistic. I wanted to make a difference and do what matters, and sometimes when you're in business, that's kind of hard to do. So it's that tension between how much are you simply responding to a client's request versus how much are you shaping it. It's I've been very fortunate. My clients are definitely, they've allowed me not to be an order taker. It's been a partnership where we talk about what they're seeing, what symptoms they're seeing, what symptoms I'm seeing. We talk about what are possible diagnoses and treatments. And so that what we end up doing collectively and or what my job is aligns with who I am and how I want to show up. But that hasn't always been the case. And I've certainly had clients and engagements and jobs where I'm doing what I'm asked to do, which I don't think was the best thing to do at that point, but that's what the clients asked for. So I think for me, more experience, greater maturity, all of those things that come with that has allowed me to be much more intentional about what do I really want to do? How do I want to show up? How to evaluate the fit in advance so that when I'm in working with a client, what they want, what I want, it's all aligned and we can do good things together.
Yeah, I recognize that in a way that, well, the better I know what I want and the better I know to articulate that to clients, the more happy they are with the work I do, the more happy I am because yeah, the more happy I am, usually I end up doing more work. So yeah, that is a win-win for everybody. And just delivering what they've asked for, even and when you, especially when you know that that's not the thing that will help them, and then it comes back again to speaking the truth to power. Like sometimes telling a client, even if they're at risk of losing a job or losing an opportunity, to say, well, if that's what you want, then I don't think it's the best thing. But if you still want that, then maybe I'm not the best choice for you.
Yes, and to me, that is one of the reasons why I went independent and started my own company, is because I wanted to be able to have that discussion very frankly. You know, we're not selling vanilla ice cream. That's like everybody loves. It's not that. It's something special. It's something unique, and it's not for everybody. It's entirely fair for a client to say, you know what, that's not what we want. Great. But there are other places, other clients that do want that. So how do we, as the company, as a consultant, how do we choose the right fit for us so that we're able to make a difference? And it is a win-win scenario, as you said.
Hmm. And so that is a hard thing. How did you learn to deal with these situations, and how do you do that? Because especially as an independent, yeah, you need income as well. So I can imagine that in the beginning years when you do that, it's kind of hard. Like, yeah, this is why I became independent. I don't want to do it, but if I don't say yes, I might not have money. How do you make that kind of choices, or how do you? Yeah.
You know, it's a balance of factors, and there is a deal of privilege involved with that. Sometimes, you know, you do what you need to. Sometimes you do have more choices. I think I did it earlier. Being able to articulate what I do and what I don't do, and you know, a good client, they want to fit too. So if you're able to say, I can do this and not this, and be very clear on that, they will self-select out. And the other thing about being independent, yes, it's hard, finances, balancing all of those things, but also I don't need 100,000 clients. I just need a few clients. So even if 10 people say no, if one person says yes, mission accomplished. So basically, lots of failures of what it feels like to take on a job that's not quite the right fit, and you do your best, but it's never, at least in my experience, when I've taken engagement that were not the right fit, it was not a win-win scenario. And so these days, I think I'm just much more explicit about what is it, and sometimes being able to say no to one thing and trust that something else will come along.
But where do you find the energy for that trust? Because especially if the bank account is going down, and
You know, I've been generally very fortunate. Most of my clients are referrals. And so I think someone described it to me as, I was told to call you if I want agile, but not that kind of agile. And so it's self selection, I think. You know, it's how you show up, it's where you show up, and you meet people who are like minded and they recommend you to their people. And sometimes it's luck, other times it is, what is the definition of luck? When opportunity meets preparation. So I think the more that you're working on yourself about what you want to do, self-awareness, and the more that you are expanding your toolkit. And I think the third part, again, for me, journalism is being able to speak about what we do in the language that our customers recognize. I think that's important. The more that you can speak in their language, the better you can evaluate the fit. The more likely you are to find clients who are willing to be partners with you, who are willing to leverage your expertise and their knowledge of their organization to make a difference.
Yeah, I can only agree. I think it's something I've recognized myself a lot, and it was for me, or is for me, a main reason to be independent and also to say, okay, I choose the things, even though in my case it means in many times I choose for larger projects where I can help out, but it's the very same thing. I only want to say yes to the things where I want to do, and in many cases, I might just start off with just a couple of months. Let's figure out if this is a match for both of us, and then see if I can take the real job, or if we can move on further. Because it's not always easy to figure that out in a first conversation, I would say. And even in many conversations, sometimes you only figure it out by actually working together.
You do. So, for most of my career as an independent or small business owner, I worked in very tight 3 to 6 month increments where I would only take on engagement for 3 to 6 months because generally that was enough to equip the client with what they would need to address the problem they were facing. My job is not to solve problems. It is to help them explore their problem and find their own solutions. I see myself more as a facilitator. So usually in 3 to 6 months, I'm able to work with them enough where they feel like they can continue working on the problem or continue their journey wherever it might take them.
Exactly. I think that's, yeah, very, very crucial. And yeah, you help them solve the problems themselves more than you solving the problems for them. Um, Although it sometimes frustrates them because they might say, "But I hired you to solve it." But yeah, we have some disagreement on some of them. And sometimes we do solve problems in a way. For me, at least, I want to show them that it can be solved. So then it might be good to just say, okay, I know you don't know it. Let me give you an example. Um, but especially if you work there for a very short time, like you say, 3 to 6 months, you want them to be able to work without you in 6 months. So yeah, so then
Absolutely. And I think good facilitation is not about letting them just flounder and figure things out on their own. It's actively being a partner in their learning. And I think if we can do that well, 3 to 6 months is really enough for people to be able to get a new perspective. If we can help them change their perspective, give them some new toolkit things they may not have before. I sometimes comparing it to sometimes clients say, here's a lock, please find a key for it, or you can cut a key for it. Well, we can do that. Or we can teach people how to pick locks so they can unlock this problem lock as well as other problems that come along because given the complexity of most organizations today, it is not just one problem they're trying to solve. There are so many different locks that need to be unlocked. So if I can teach someone how to pick locks, they don't need to call me again.
I would have never described my job as teaching people how to pick locks because I'm not sure how smart business wise that is. But when you hear the full story, I completely agree. But again, this is something you put that on social media and people completely misunderstand it.
Yeah,
Uh,
the takeaway could be I'm recommending being a burglar because lockpicking is a burglar thing. But no, it's the nuance of a conversation and it's finding an example that resonates. And I think so much of the work that we do, it's language and mental models that people can connect with. You know, the the more that we're able to step away from some of the consulting jargon and talk about very specific examples, whether it's journalism or lockpicking or whatever it is, the more real we can make it. I think that really does allow us to make more of an impact.
Hmm. Yeah, I really like that. Like you say, in consultancy, we sometimes have all these expensive words. Well, I'm not even sure I agree they're expensive, but they sound expensive. Uh, but yeah, then people don't really understand it, or yeah, we just think, oh yeah, you probably are smart, but then they still aren't helped.
It does. A client of mine called it boardroom talk. You know,
Mm.
boardrooms in the US are metaphorically exclusive places to which you have to earn access, and only very important people get to be in there. And a lot of business gets done in boardrooms. And for me, especially with the culture of change work, the boardroom is not the most important part. The break room would be far more important because that's where people who are doing the work are congregating. That's where you're going to find
Break
out.
room meaning the place where people have dinner together or something.
Or sorry, that is an Americanism. So break room in this context usually means a shared kitchen where there is fridge and water and coffee type of thing. So people will take their break there, go get food and drinks.
Right, that's what I thought it was, but yeah, glad you explained it because indeed, I'm not sure everybody might understand that jargon because that's jargon as well. Um, well, I really like how we move into that whole discussion. So I feel already a lot of the passion and how you move from one to another. So there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of drive. Do you know what drives you, where that passion and that drive is coming from?
Two things. One, as we referenced before, learning. I I love learning something new that I did not know the day before. And these days, being able to apply that learning to make an impact. One of the amazing gifts I think of this kind of work is the ability to make an impact for somebody else. And there are times when it's almost like a, again, metaphors, billiards or pool, right? If you're playing billiards, your intersection in somebody else's life may change the trajectory of their path or yours. And to me, that's the impact. Can we make a difference for somebody else? And learning book knowledge, theory, all those things that we do try hard to cultivate for ourselves. In this line of work, what drives me now is how can I take these things that I know and make a difference for other people, make things better for organizations.
Wow, that's and do you know where that originally came from? Is that something you've learned from your parents? Is that something that was there already for a long time? How?
I don't know. I mean, like most things, it's a bit of one, bit of another. So one thing is that I grew up in about 10 different countries and 20 different states. So
Wow.
yes, lots of moving around and exposure to different cultures. And I think one of the legacies of that kind of childhood is you see the range of possibilities. And my family had been through countries that have gone through revolutions and upheavals, and you learn to appreciate how precious it is to have a safe environment for people. Because when a country is no longer safe, the impact is catastrophic. And so, not at that scale, but to me, the lesson I took from that experience is how can we all invest something of ourselves in keeping our ecosystem, our countries, our organization, the planet better for everybody. It's so easy to lose ground and been so hard won that we do have to fight to keep the relative safety and security. I mean, you know, I was a historian for a long time, and these days the world is safer for more people ever has been. And so, how do we continue to invest in that safety? How do we continue to increase education and literacy and all of those good things?
Interesting thing is, if you look at the numbers, we are living in a safer world, but the opposite people have the opposite feeling. They think that it's worse than before. Especially, I see, yeah, in your country, it's, there is a lot of discussions, and it people like, it's worse or whatever. No, it's actually even there. The numbers are better, I think.
It one of the things about knowledge, a little learning is very dangerous. We have, I think, forgotten, or some of us never quite learned, how to distinguish an emotion from a fact. Just because you feel something doesn't automatically make it right.
Mm.
Facts are not objective. And it does take a certain degree of maturity, I think, to be able to say, I'm feeling this way, so let me look around and see what is causing me to feel this way. Is this emotion warranted? I mean, every emotion is fine, but what are you making your decision on? What are you reacting to? And part of that is who's around you. I think we do underestimate the influence we have on each other. And depending on who's around you, your perceptions can become very distorted. And somehow being able to say, this is how I feel, okay? What's going on around me? Am I reacting to something that is immediately there for me? Is it perception? Is it other people's fears? And I think that's one of those legacies of social media. Sometimes when we know too much, we get overwhelmed because, again, the nuance is lost. And what is most accessible very often is fear.
That yeah, I recognize a lot of that. That's and again, with social media, then we see also the impact of different kind of countries or people trying to influence us in all kind of directions. And I would say also the opposite side as well. I mean, there's a couple of important wars that might have a huge impact on the world busy right now. And at the same time, I noticed that not everybody realizes that. I'm these days working with people who are in Ukraine, in Lviv. So these are people that are, yeah, having attacks on their country on a daily basis, sometimes even on their friends' houses, losing friends and families. And people in my home country in Belgium might not always realizing. And at a level that my colleagues might not always want to share it again, what happened last night, because they say, I don't want to bother you. Yeah, but because of that, we don't always know what's going on.
We don't. And Americans have a pretty well deserved reputation for being a little bit oblivious to the rest of the world. It's a big country. Not everybody travels, and sometimes it's very easy to be in the middle of the U.S. and say, "Oh, that's never going to make a difference for me. I'm in my own little world." But ultimately, it's a value proposition, right? Everything that happens around the world happens to me, and so what do I do to make it better for everybody else?
Yeah, I recognize that. That's and I would say, especially because the world is way more connected, we would feel a lot of that in a way. So yeah, that's the world is becoming smaller and bigger at the same time, I would say.
It is, and balancing that tension, I think that's the challenge because it, we talk about fear. It's so easy to be afraid because there's so many new things every time. You're like, wait, what happened? I don't recognize this. Well, if we can approach it with curiosity and maybe even joy, well, here's something new I haven't seen before. So instead of fear, we can allow ourselves to tap into the better emotions, but that takes practice and it takes intent.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And we went back in the full circle in a way, but I really like that. Yeah, it kind of shows your passion, I would definitely say. So that's in that sense a very nice way to have that answer to that question. I want to move to that next one, and so what's your biggest achievement? And before we jump into that, I want to go to a question I've been asking a lot these days about that is before that question. This is basically your moment to brag, and so is that easy for you as a person to brag, or is that harder?
No, because I was certainly raised with bragging is not something that nice people do. That's not appropriate. It's not proper, and it's a cultural difference.
Nice people or women? Because I sometimes see it much more for women than for men.
So definitely. So I grew up in Iran and India, both cultures that are very gender specific. And no, nice girls don't do this, good girls don't do this, good girls listen more than they talk, all of those things. So growing up with that cultural legacy, it took me a while, especially in business, because in business you do have to advocate for yourself. There's a difference between bragging and taking credit for your work, because that is how your clients see value. So being able to say, this is what I helped do. Now, I do notice I still say I helped do as opposed to I did it. So there is still that little bit of legacy there, but I don't think that's all bad. So it took me a long time to learn how to take credit for my own achievements and be proud of them.
And is there because I want to stay a little bit with that. It took you a long time. Do you have any tips or tricks for other people that still have trouble doing that?
Sure. One thing is, actually a quote from Hamilton, the musical: who tells your story? If you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell it for you. And that may or may not be true. So if you can separate out I'm talking all about myself, I'm making it about me, and I'm being egotistical about, what is the story of this organization in which you had a part? And for me, that goes back to journalism. So if I think back to, as we're doing an organizational transformation, what's the story? Who's writing the story? And yes, I am one of the characters, but so is everybody else. So how do we write an inclusive story? I think there is a way to talk about the work while crediting everybody without diminishing yourself. I actually have a note on my monitor that literally says, don't apologize or self-deprecate. Because I've been told so often by so many friends that I tend to self-deprecate far more than I should. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. They're like, okay, take out the word sorry. So some of this is, it's practice. It's having good people around you who will tell you you're doing this thing that's not helping you be yourself, have an impact that you want, whatever it is that you want. And the last thing is, give yourself a little bit of grace. Changing behavior is hard. Changing our own thought patterns is even harder. So knowing what you want to change, that's part of it. But then applying it, you're going to fail sometimes. You're going to succeed sometimes. All of those are part of the learning journey. So giving yourself grace in that journey, that's the biggest thing.
Remember, I think it was from Christopher Avery in a workshop. He said he wanted people, when you want to change behavior or want to see something, he said take a post-it and divide it in two, and then you put crosses or lines every time you see yourself, then you changed it, and also when you see yourself when you didn't change. And he said even in the beginning you will have much more times that you saw that you didn't change it, but actually good, because before that you didn't even notice it, and now you're already at the place where you notice it. And it was so hard for me and many other people there to say, yeah, but it's bad. No, 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 it's good. You actually see that you're doing it. And giving people around you or at least that's one of the things I did, is giving people around me the permission, and even maybe the desire, asking them, when you see me doing this or that, tell me, like, okay, and then we can get somewhere. So I really like. But and now we took the full side note. So I still am interested in, what is the thing that your biggest achievement?
I would say that the team, so my company went from being an independent consultant to we have 9 people. And I think
Hmm.
that is a very significant achievement for me, because it was not something I wanted to do. It was something that I was kind of pushed towards doing by some very, very good mentors and coaches. And, I never thought of myself as a manager or a leader or any of those things. Like, no, I'm not good at that stuff. Just let me do my own thing. And then now we have this team that I am so proud of. Having this team, I've described it like having magic. I say things and things happen, and they're so much bigger and better than I could have done on my own. And so I think it's both, right? I'm proud of the fact that I've done some things that I didn't necessarily want to do or thought I was good at doing, and it's worked out amazingly. And I'm proud of all the people who said yes to something that was completely unknown. And so together we're creating this company and this team. And I think it is a collective achievement, and it is one that I'm very proud of. Okay, I'm not hearing you.
You're no longer hearing me?
I can hear you now. I just lost you for a couple of seconds in the middle.
Okay. So what I find interesting is that you're now very proud of that, although you didn't want to do that. So you've like you say, you were kind of pushed by mentors. Could you say some more about that story?
Sure. So, because I had been specializing in short term engagement because I was a company at one, that's all I could do. And so when COVID happened, most of my regular clients were like, "We'll call you back in a year." And I'm like, "Okay, what do I do now? When's the next client coming from?" An old friend called and said, "I have this client. It's a big thing. They're not particularly happy. Can you come down here for 3 months and just buy me some time to fix everything else?" I said, "Okay, 3 months, my timeline usually, so fine, I will do it." And I came into the organization, and they were trying to do something for a while that did not work. It was kind of the agile gone wrong thing. And I went to my then client and said, "Okay, what is this? This is not agile. This is not transforming. Everybody's miserable. Can I fix this or can I leave? Because this is not productive for anybody." And so he set me a challenge and said, "Okay, you can talk to my boss. If you can convince him, you can fix it." That boss, who's now my client, basically said, "Here's this consultant who's been here 2 years, comes into a Zoom room and tells me I'm wrong about everything." And the smartest thing I did was let her prove me wrong. So he took a chance on me and said, "Fine, you fix it." And so we did fix it. And I think we made a lot of progress in a very short amount of time, and it worked. And I was about to say bye and go on to the next thing. And he started laughing and said, "Not so fast. We have lots more work for you." So I've been doing more work in this organization. And at some point, he literally said, "We have way more work than you can do by yourself. So you have three options. You can come inside, be an employee." And I'm like, "No, my job works better from the outside. Once I come in, I have a title, I have a rank, and I become part of the system." And he's like, "Okay, two other options. You can find partners, or you can build your own company." And he said, "I would not recommend partners for you because no one's going to do things exactly the way you like. So go build a team, go build a company, because we could use more help from you."
He could have hired more extra people without having you hired, and then said, "Okay, put you in charge." But he basically said, "Okay, you do it your way and build it." And so that's and we will pay for it in a way, because he was saying, I yeah, it was, so
Yes.
that could release some kind of pressure, I would say, at
Oh,
some level.
absolutely. I mean, I know I'm so incredibly fortunate. I had a client who trusted me to be able to build a team that would deliver value to their organization. And I think it worked out that way. But, it was certainly a gamble on his part, and one that I respect him tremendously for doing. He took a chance on me.
Mhm. Well, yeah, more than a chance, I think, like you say, he pushed you, and like, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
he kind of invested in you and you as a company in a way as well, I would say.
Very, very much so. He's invested in me both in terms of the opportunity to build a team, to be a supportive client, but also as a mentor. A lot of the stuff that he's talked me through of how do you go from a solopreneur to being a CEO of a company, even a very small company. It's a shift in mindset. It's a shift in perspective. And doing leadership coaching doesn't suddenly equip me to be a leader. It's a different role. And so I've had a lot of mentoring and support from my clients as I'm transitioning into a different role.
So that's yeah. But again, this is how if you want to help clients grow, you grow as well, and in a way, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think that's how he made the case for me. He's like, "We've got bigger problems to solve that you can help solve, but you would need somebody else to still continue working on the other things." And so that's a pretty hard argument to say no to. So I'm very glad I said yes.
That's a really nice story, and yeah, in that way, a very nice achievement. So thanks for sharing that story.
My pleasure.
Let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share? Is this something that you say, this is, yeah, what I like to share?
I think for me, it's visualization. You know, we take for granted the Kanban boards and whatever boards we have, but to me, that is absolutely essential for personal agility. So I'm kind of notorious for having lots of different interests and wanting to do a lot of different things. So I think visualization is how you can see the big picture of what you're trying to do so that you can make choices on a weekly, daily basis. What am I prioritizing? So I have this thing I call a kaleidoscope. That is a big circle with three circles, inner circles that have every part of my life represented on it. It's my business, it's the client work, it's my personal life, it's family, it's friends, it's passion project I want to do. It's my life at a glance, and it keeps me on track. Am I moving the right things? Am I focusing too much on one thing versus another? And it's a very visual check-in, almost subconsciously. And I have a quarterly planning schedule because yes, I'm an agile nerd, so I do this. But this is being able to visualize both what you're doing as well as the outcomes you're aiming for is the biggest tip I have.
Much helpful.
Thank you.
If we can see what's on your in our mind. I used to have a trying to come up with the name. I think it was called Personal Agility Workshop, and with one person, I gave them. Then I was still using index cards, so the part of the course was based on GTD, getting things done. So I asked people write down everything that's on your mind, and I gave everybody a pack of 100 index cards. And I still remember in that particular classroom, the first person I gave it to was a CEO of a small, I don't know, 100 people company, so not that small. And I gave him an index card and said, "Yeah, but I know everything is. I don't need to write down." I said, "Still, please write it down because we're going to use it the rest of the 2 days." Um, and in the end, he asked for more cars because after 100, he still had more things. And there was everything on his mind. And he looked at his desk and was like, okay, maybe I have a little bit too much on my mind and too
And see,
much.
that's it, right? We talk about WIP limits a lot in Agile, but instead of WIP limit being something that we enforce for our clients, if you're visualizing and visualizing well, the aha moment comes from them of, oh, I maybe should put some limits or I should sequence things differently. And change is always easier when someone sees the need for it themselves versus they're being told to change.
It's the more we visualize it, the more we see the how much that is not how are we not limiting, and in a way it's usually limiting us because we're procrastinating then even more because we're spending a lot of time on what will I do because I have to think about all the balloons in my head. And when we visualize it, it's a little bit easier to, or at least in many cases, much more easier.
It certainly helps.
Okay, I want to move to that next question about remote work. And I don't know, did you do remote work before COVID or?
Not at all. So if you had asked me before COVID, I would have said, oh no, this is not a remote control job at all. I need to like see people. I need to hear people. I need to connect with people. And the biggest thing I've learned about remote working is the kind of amazing, trusting relationships you can build with somebody without ever having met them. It's it's simply not something that I had experienced or really believed in. But you know, working with new clients, working with new people, fully remote, you can build trust, you can build empathy, you can build collaboration remotely in a way that I would not have thought possible 5 years ago.
And that's all because of COVID or?
So I think certainly, technology has evolved where you can do things remote in a way that you could not. Some of the whiteboarding tools, some of those things are certainly more sophisticated than they were before. That makes it easier. I think it comes down to human nature. We do things when we're forced to do them. And so pre-COVID, I didn't really have to think about how would I do this remotely until I had to. And one, like, okay, how do I connect with people remotely? You start researching, you start putting things into practice, and you basically trial and error. And like, oh, this is working. Now, I will say this, remote is not the answer for everything. Some things are truly, truly better in person, especially when you're building ideas and co creating. Yeah, there's something to be lost there, but there's a lot to be gained by remote, including accessibility. Technology makes work more accessible for people who may not always be able to participate in person. So, to me, the additional ability to include more voices and more people that you get through remote is offset by whatever small losses we have by in person.
I would need a lot more things to be able to talk to each and everyone, and get connected, because like here we're already spending about an hour, something like that, learning about each other, and we take the time for it, because that's what, for me, one of the things, taking that time is something that, yeah, when we want to connect, we can take the time remote. And I think we don't always realize how much time we take when we meet each other physically. Uh,
I think it cuts both ways, right? So, when we're in person, we know that we do the social, the hallway chatter, water cooler, whatever you call it, but we don't realize how much time and how valuable that time is. I think with remote, you just have to be more intentional of creating the time and the space to get to know people, not just their work, but their individual. Because for to trust somebody and for them to trust you, you have to know that person, not just their work, and that takes time and effort. And so we have to make time for it. But if we do, the rewards are very much worth it, in my opinion.
And so, is there a trick that you can share about how to then do that much more remote?
There's one that works for me, and I think that is be willing to be vulnerable first. So the thing about relationships is they require trust, and for trust to happen, someone has to take the first step. And so to me, it's my job to do that. If I can share something about myself, it allows people to see me as a person, and they're more willing to share something about them. It's a very human nature kind of thing, I think. Who are you? Why should I trust you to help me improve my job? Or why should I trust you to tell you what I'm seeing? We have to earn trust. And I think starting with a degree of vulnerability is helpful in cultivating trust. And the second part is keep that trust. It's being authentic and intentional about who we are. And are we somebody who shows up authentically? Do we say what we mean? Do we mean what we say? That's trust. And you have to cultivate it. It requires self awareness, it requires a degree of vulnerability, and it requires continuing to take the chance to trust somebody new. I think for relationships, that is important, and in remote, it's even more important. So, one thing we can all try it every day. What can I do today to be a little bit more vulnerable in a specific situation? Sometimes it can be as simple as saying, I don't know. One of the best leaders I know does that very well. He's very comfortable saying, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but together we're all pretty smart, so let's figure it out. And so that to me is an example of a leader being vulnerable. I was just talking to another leader not that long ago, and she was talking in such impactful way about what drives us as human beings, about emotions, about fear and shame and guilt. That's another example of a leader modeling vulnerability, candidness. Those kind of things go a long way towards building trust, especially remote.
Would say indeed before COVID, we were thinking, that's not possible remote. It is, but it takes skills, and we need to learn these skills that we didn't do. We didn't never take the effort before, I would say, or not enough. And now we were forced during a couple of years to try them out. And some of us had success. And like you say, it's not for all the kind of work and for everything. Um, but yeah, it can work for some of these things. Okay, I want to move to that next question. What is a book that you have read? And I think you had a couple of them, so let's talk.
Sure. So one of the books I read recently is called Anthrovision. It is by a former anthropologist who became a newspaper reporter, and it talks about how to look at world events, global events through the lens of an anthropologist. And I found it incredibly illuminating because of, again, my background in journalism and political science. I think one of the reasons that I'm effective in this role is that I do have that different perspective of understanding systems and politics, all of those things. So I think it reaffirmed for me there is space in technology for people who don't have technology backgrounds. And
And I think that's the book, right?
yes, yes, that is a,
Oops. And
it's a.
if I, why would I need to read it? Let's do that.
I think it's a book that helps us understand how else could we look at a problem. So often we think we know everything. We know the problem, we know the solution, it's a matter of doing it. And what this book reminded me of is there's so many different ways to look at a space, a problem, an organization. There are different frames. So for me, what works is thinking about this as a translator, as a linguist, as a doctor. How would I look at it from a different specialty? And when you look at that, you see more options. And I think that's the value of not only what are the other frames that we can use to understand a context, but what is the additional value generated by people with very different sets of experience and expertise? Because they will see something we don't see. Most of the problems that we work with these days, these are very complex. They're multidisciplinary problems that resist easy solutions. So there's so much value of bringing in people who may not have the direct experience, expertise that we do because they will see something. And the more that we do that, I think the clearer the picture becomes. It's like, the film that you keep layering on. Every film you add, every frame clears up a little bit. If you can add lots of different people's perspective, the whole picture becomes clearer. And I think you can see more options for how to address it or solve it.
It's an important thing to learn and to yeah, and like you say, with your background, I think especially interesting. But yeah, well, I was about to say you almost convinced or you convinced me, but then I have so many other people that talk me about books, so I'm not sure when I will read it. But it's definitely something that I think if we can look at the world in a different way, it's always important and look at that. So that's definitely something that's an interesting one. And you had a second book in mind.
Sure. So I was thinking about your question about what made a difference for me. And I think this book called The Trusted Advisor, it's an older book, as we were just discussing. It's almost 20 years old at this point.
This is the 20th anniversary edition. So, yeah, it's more than 20 years old.
I would highly recommend this book because I think trust is foundational to everything that we do as consultants and as individuals. And so I think this book really reminded me of how trust works. And the reference I made earlier about in order to cultivate a relationship of trust, you have to take a chance. And so this book really shaped a lot of my thinking around trust. And trust is foundational both for the partnership I have with my clients, because part of my job is to earn the client's trust and help them trust each other. So that's the trusted advisor role, but also as I'm shifting into this role about building a team and of being a mentor for other people who trust me, how can I be deserving of that trust? How can I continue to maintain their trust? So this book is definitely one that stayed very close to me.
Yeah, I can definitely see. And yeah, as how would I say it? For yeah, if you start becoming a consultant, and this is definitely a kind of book that helps you in yeah thinking in that direction, and definitely important. And I think that's one for me, one of the advices that I gave many people, no matter what job you are, the moment you become a consultant, stop learning about the job that you're doing, but learning about the job of a consultant, because you can't you probably know your job. That's the reason why you think you want to go to the independent part and helping others. And then learning about what's the other job next to that, and learning there. I think it's an
I,
important part. So yeah.
the thing about being a consultant is, at least for me, it's about being a facilitator for our clients. What are they trying to do? How can we make it easier for them? How can we help them see more options, achieve more, whatever it is? It's that, and trust is integral to all of those.
Mhm. Exactly. I want to move to, for me, one of the most important or most interesting questions, with especially after conversations like that go in all kind of direction. What question do you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
I think it's hard to answer just because we've covered so much ground in this conversation. We've
I
gone
agree.
journalism and politics, and I think that is what I would have said, right? So we let's talk to people, not just the titles they have or the roles they have. And I think we've already done that. I think too often we tend to define ourselves and each other by the roles and titles. And so what I would have suggested was, yes, let's talk about what brought us here, our journey. So I think I would reverse and say, I would love to hear more about your journey because we've been talking about mine pretty much the whole time.
Um, well, yeah, this. Well, for me, well, maybe let's share. Okay, I probably shared it already, but I can share also how this whole project got away, or got created in multiple editions. That is, so I need to think back. It's probably 2009, 2010. Olaf Lewitz, who's a friend of mine that I worked with, the coach in Germany, I created a blog post or a series of blog posts about awesome coaches. And so in one of them, he talked about me, and I was, first of all, flabbergasted. Why would somebody talk about me? And okay, we work together and we really like to work to each other, and we've done really great things together at a certain client. Um, but then I thought, oh, I was looking for ways how to, yeah, have more things on my blog and what I could write about. And I thought, oh, that's actually a nice thing to talk about others. But there's also, like with many consultants, we're already too much on our plate, helping so much time our customers. Like, I don't have time. I have tons of people I want to talk about, but how do I find the time to actually write something very good and profound on people? So I thought, okay, let's do the opposite. Let's create some questions, and I send these to people, and they'll answer it. And I have content for my blog, and I give them a place to talk about themselves. So I thought this was genius idea. So I came up in a rather short time, like 5 to 7 minutes. I don't know, very short time. I came up with 7 or 8 questions, and I sent it out to a couple of friends. And I thought, oh, really proud. This is going to work, fantastic. And then I waited, nothing happens, and I was like, okay, I thought I was so smart inventing some questions, so I don't get answers. Okay, maybe I wrote it to the wrong people, so I send it off to probably 10 more. Again, no answers after a day. So I kept writing to more people, and then for one of the few moments in my life, I went off grid. So with my partner, we did, I don't remember anymore. We did something in the weekend, so I completely didn't do read internet, email, whatever. And by the time I came back on a Sunday evening, or I think it was a long weekend, so probably Monday morning, I had like, yeah. So by that time, I had invited more than 50 people, and I had like more than 10 answers, and I think 20 answers. But I was like, whoa, okay, it did work. What I didn't realize is inventing these questions is rather easy, but people really want to take the time to write the answers. So they wanted the weekend to take the time to write the answers. And I didn't think about that. And nobody told me, like, hey, I liked it. Give me some time and I'll answer you. Um, so then the interesting thing is now I had to tell some people, like, oh, I wanted to publish them in the order that I got them. But if you have 20 answers, 20 weeks, that's like 6 months of answers to do that. And so I told everybody nicely, okay, it will be published then. And then I got yeah, one of my friends and someone who's rather dear to me, she got so angry at me. She said, I spent my weekend writing this, and now you tell me it's going to be published in 5 or 6 months. Well, it's like, okay. And yeah, and I realized that success and a failure is so close to each other, because at the state it looked like a failure, it became a success, and it became a failure, and again, because now there was too much whip or too much things happening. Yeah, and so that was a very interesting thing to do. And then it moved on to turning into a book, an ebook. And then a couple of years later, so now, and what was it, 2 years ago, I decided to turn it into a video series, and then that's what we're having here. So yeah, it's
Well, thank you for sharing a bit of your journey. And I love what you're saying about success and failure. They're so close. And sometimes we give up too fast. Sometimes success is just around the corner if we allow it to happen.
exactly. And so there, I didn't want it to fail, so I kept writing, but I didn't realize and that I should have probably asked, if you're interested, just tell me, and then we can take it further. And
Moves are a
yeah,
good thing.
yeah, shooting off an email is easy, but especially if you're asking questions, and these kind of questions are rather deep. So I'm still myself amazed that I came up with these questions in very little amount of time. But I really like, and this example, this interview is a nice example of it. How we can, with these kind of questions, go in all kind of directions. It's always very interesting discussions and very interesting things to have a chat about.
I think, the questions are phrased in a way that allows the conversation to evolve. And I think your follow up questions also help with that. I mean, you've asked me far more than the questions on that list, but that's the conversation and that's where the magic happens. So I think it's a good thing.
That is true. That is, and this is why I like the video series much more than the writing, because we can go deeper into, with some follow up questions, and see where things are. Because typically, like a little bit like what you said in the beginning, people say something but only half, and then if I notice it, I we might go a little bit deeper in some of these things.
I think one of the first rules about coaching, right? So when I got into coaching, at least agile coaching, I was sort of taught that, oh, business value is what people already know. You just have to elicit it. Okay, I don't know about you, but one of the hardest things for me as a new coach was to understand that not everybody is self aware
Mm.
and that a lot of people have actively been told not to be self aware because, that's too egotistical or whatever. So, this whole idea of who am I? What matters to me? What do I think? Our education system generally says repeat back what you've been taught as opposed to really finding your own voice. And for coaching, either to be a coachee or to coach, there needs to be a high degree of self awareness.
Yeah, I agree. And this is, well, for me, one of the things I keep asking people who start to become a coach is like that. I ask them, like, okay, do you have a coach yourself? Because do you know what it is to be coached? Because sometimes people don't realize that yeah, even if the coach says the right things, if we are not ready to hear it, or if it's going too fast or whatever, I might have a bad day. So okay, that is important to realize that. And as a coach, if I've been for all the years, I always had one or multiple kind of coaches at multiple levels, and it taught me so much about myself and self-awareness, but also about, yeah, about coaching as a whole. Because the more I've been a coachee, I couldn't be the coach I am today without being a coachee. Let's put it like that.
It's empathy, right? Being a coachee reminds, at least for me, it's a constant reminder of what the degree of trust people have in us as a coach.
Mm.
It's a lot of power that we have. And how are we using it wisely? How are we using it generously to help the people we're coaching? And so I think having coaches reminds me that there's a very strong power dynamic in coaching that we need to be aware of and work with.
I want to go to that last question about who else should I also ask, and because yeah, these I would like to have much more of these kind of conversations.
So I would say be careful what you ask for because I have a whole list of people I would suggest. So one person that comes to mind is an incredibly awesome woman who's also a very good friend. Anjali Leon. She does a lot of work around product coaching. She's based here in Florida, but
And I think that's her.
that is, wow, yes, that is her. So she is one of the wise women that I am lucky to have in my life. So I think you'll have a very interesting conversation with her.
And what could you say some more? Why should I have a conversation with her?
So I think, in the professional sense, she's an expert on product development and she has some unique ways to understand what product management looks like in different phases. So she calls them product stances, and I think that's very illuminating from a professional context. But I think also from a more personal philosophical context, she's kind of wrestling or wrestled with all the same conversations we've had. How do I make an impact? How do I balance what I need with what my business needs? How do I help make a difference for other people and not burn myself out? So I
Mm.
think, you know, I I love three-dimensional people who are wise and pragmatic, and she is definitely one of those.
It sounds again like a very nice conversation to have. And so you said you had a list. So yeah,
Yep.
what's the second name?
April Jefferson is again another friend and somebody I respect very much. April, she's she's so many things. Coach, mentor, friend, collaborator, all of those things. But one of the best gifts about April is she holds space for things to happen. And that is an incredibly rare ability. And I've seen her not just open space, but anywhere where she is. April is just, she creates an environment where people can be authentic, where magic happens. So,
Mm.
and one of the reasons why I think I would recommend her for this type of conversation is she's a serial collaborator. She worked with so many different people on so many different things. Again, a very multifaceted person who would have lots of opinions on lots of things that she's doing, and she's a constant learner. So again, and yes, there is a pattern to my friendships, right? They're all people who are very much trying to learn and be better and make a difference.
Yeah, and April has been invited already by Diana Larson and William Larson. Both of them have, and I think, let me check. I think no, that's the two people that have already invited. So far, we were not able to come up with a time to do it, but I'm really looking forward to have that conversation with her. So
She's a very she's busy. Like I said, she's a serial collaborator, and sometimes finding time on April's calendar is like once in a blue moon. So
exactly, that's it's. I think it's mostly the time than anything else why it didn't work out. But yeah, definitely, I'm looking forward to having that conversation. So after this one, I will remind her again and see if we have a moment to find a time in the near future.
I think it's what you said, right? When we do our work, we have a business that we run, we try to have some semblance of a life, and it's hard to fit everything in.
Oh yeah, but then and again to make it very clear, I fully understand why it's hard. There's a couple of people where yeah, it's just both our agendas are not always aligned, and then it's hard. And some I don't know if with April we had already one thing scheduled and then it fell away. But there's a couple of people like this where things got scheduled. Like also last night was something scheduled, and then the person said like, actually, I realized that in the next month this is the only evening I would have been able to spend time with my family. So maybe let's cancel. And I said, of course. That's I yeah, I regret that I can't talk to you, but if in it would take more than a month before you actually still have decent time to talk to your family, I'm not going the one that's going to take out a couple of hours out of that. And I think indeed that's April might be also one of these people with fully booked agendas for this.
Yeah.
And I think you still had at least one more person that you had in mind.
So I was going to say, Nadezhda Belusova is another person I was thinking of. She's closer to where you are. I think she's working in Germany right now. Uh, I've learned so much from Nadezhda. It's She has this amazing ability to connect the dots on 100 different things. And conversations with her cover a very wide range of topics because she does have expertise and interest in so many different things. And every time I talk to her, I end up with a different perspective that I didn't have before, just because she is both brilliant and generous. So I think you would have a very interesting conversation with her.
It's already like a nice one to have. Okay. Do you still want to add some more, or do we move on?
I should probably ask for their permission before tossing out more people's names. So I'm happy to do that by email. If that's okay.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. Let's add some more because indeed, for some, not everybody, I might have the contact details. Well, yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. If people want to reach out to you, what could be a good way to reach out to you?
So email is probably the fastest way to reach me, and my email is Leila Leila at agileextended.com. It's agile extended, so there's no two e's. There is that.
Mhm.
LinkedIn is probably a decent way to find me, with the caveat that I'm not always active on LinkedIn, so it might
That's
just.
Agile Extended on LinkedIn, I would say. Then by that, people find immediately how Agile Extended is written.
I think so. And then send me an email. I do tend to get lost in client work for days at a time, but I promise I will respond. It just may not be immediately.
Well, I think yeah, that's a little bit what we have. We have so many different kind of inboxes these days on all these kind of media and all these kind of things. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to not get lost into that. But I have to say also for us, getting this organized went rather quickly. So yeah, if you say that you get distracted, definitely I did get fast response. So I didn't feel any of that.
Good. I just don't want to make commitments I can't keep. But no, this was a pleasure. And I'm so glad I made time for this conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time. It's been really a wonderful time. Yeah, it's this is how I like to have these kind of conversations where we can go in all kind of directions and learn new people. Both do it from our own home. So yeah, I by the time that we had it, I was all alone when we started this, and now I see already family members jumping into my house, so I can reconnect. And yeah, so that's I've been to the other part of the world, and now I can come back to Belgium. So that's for me is a nice way to end my week. So I would really like to thank you, and hopefully one day we can actually meet in person and to have
Thank
the
you. Thank you for the opportunity to have this amazing conversation. It's so rare to have just time and space to have these kind of conversations. And yes, I would love it if we can meet one day.
Okay. Thank you. Bye
Thank you
bye.
for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.